Now, let's go to Western Australia now and catch up with former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer, who's flown back into Australia and he's on his way back here for Christmas doing quarantine, hotel quarantine in Perth. Alexander, you're in your first day. I can tell you that days 2, 3, 4, 5, they all get worse until day 14.
Thanks for the news.
Now,
I don't think you should tell me that. I'm getting by okay today.
No, I would recommend lots of work. Keep yourself busy. Do lots of interviews, as you're doing now via Skype. Now, really great chance to talk to you now about our relationship with China. You've seen it fracturing to a lot of heat in the relationship at the moment. What would be your advice to Marise Payne and Scott Morrison as the best way to try and repair this in the short term and in the longer term?
Well, I think the onus really falls on China to repair the relationship. It's they who have decided to refuse any conversations with our Prime Minister or ministers. It's they who have declared a trade war on Australia, and it's they who have descended to some of the most undiplomatic rhetoric that I've heard in the 21st century. So the Australian government just needs to be calm, be polite, be always willing to talk with the Chinese leadership and to make it clear to the Chinese leadership that if you want to deal with Australia constructively, you have to be prepared to talk to Australia. Because, you see, I think this really aggressive diplomacy by China, including declaring a trade war on Australia, is only encouraging other countries to take Australia's side and uniting the Western alliance against China. And it's creating in Washington and London and other major capitals around the world a real sense of concern at China's growing arrogance and the bullying of a country like Australia. So ultimately, I don't think this is going to do China any good. And when China understands that Australia will always be polite, but there's no virtue in bullying Australia, then having realised that isn't going to work, I assume that they will try a different tactic and start engaging with our leaders.
You were talking to us, must have been at least a month, maybe two back, about this wolf warrior diplomacy, the fact that it's so undiplomatic. It is a new dimension that we're seeing under Xi Jinping's China. But what we've seen in the last week takes that to another level. There is no diplomacy here. There is open hostility.
Well, and you haven't seen a major country behave like that too often in the 21st century. It's a very long time since I've seen senior government officials behave like that towards other significant countries in the world. Australia is not a huge country in population terms, but it's a G20 country. It's one of the dozen or so biggest economies in the world. So the other thing about Australia is it has a lot of soft power. People around the world like Australia and like Australians and will support Australia. And this kind of tweeting, as we've seen recently by the spokesman of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, of course, there's a lot of garbage on Twitter, as you know, but that sort of material put out there by the spokesman for the Foreign Ministry is absolutely disgraceful. But it reflects badly on the Chinese leadership, not the Chinese people, but on the Chinese leadership and the Chinese government. It reflects very badly on them.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting conundrum. I don't think Labor should be criticising Scott Morrison at the moment for reasons I've made clear over a number of days, but commentators can certainly do so. And one legitimate question would be if Scott Morrison didn't call a press conference on the back of that tweet, if he just dismissed it, it is the sewer wall of Twitter, just let it slide by. But the counter-argument to that is if you're going to let the Chinese foreign policy spokesperson attack your country and insult it in that way and just let it go through to the keeper, you lose self-respect in your diplomacy.
Well, as you know, Twitter is the garbage can of words, but it's not that there's something like that on Twitter, because there's something like that on Twitter every minute of every day. It's who tweeted it. Yep. That is the significant thing. I mean, the spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry. That is a huge problem. No, I think if Australia hadn't responded to it in the way that the Prime Minister did, that would have been seen to be weak. It would have looked as though we were frightened to respond. I think it is an important principle for Australia that if you dish it out to us, if you choose to do that, well, you'll get it back. So don't dish it out to us, just engage with us and engage constructively and maturely. But, they go on saying Australia has to, a deputy ambassador today was saying that Australia has to modify its behaviour and improve its behaviour as though we were children in a primary school and he was a teacher. You can't, in this modern era, deal with countries like that. You have to have a much more mature and steady approach to diplomacy than that sort of approach.
Now, just briefly, of course, you're fresh back from the UK. Tell us about how the pandemic is being managed or mismanaged in the UK and the political problems that Boris Johnson is dealing with.
Well, there's much more of a debate in the UK than there is here in Australia about how to respond to the virus, to the pandemic. They've just gone through 4 weeks of lockdown. I mean, not the kind of extreme lockdown that we've seen in Victoria or for a few days in South Australia last week. But nevertheless, there has been a fairly strong lockdown, and there's been a lot of opposition to it. I would say the majority of the public support it, but there's a lot of opposition to it. A lot of people say you just have to learn to live with COVID and make your own decisions about where you go and who you go out with and who you mix with. It shouldn't be a matter for the state. There's much more of an argument like that in the UK. And so I mention all of that because when it came to a vote on new measures that the government is introducing to replace its lockdown, but they're still pretty stringent measures, 50, I think it was, or so Conservative MPs voted against those measures, and the Labor Party abstained. So the government still got the measures through the Parliament, but nevertheless, it was a difficult period for them.
Yes.
But I suppose on the upside, they've had the approval of the Pfizer vaccine, and being the first country to approve that vaccine, and they'll be rolling that out from next week, so they say. That has been seen as good news and an improvement.
Well, thanks for joining us. I hope to see you for a beer at the beach over the summer.
Yes, assuming I get out of quarantine ultimately.
Patience. Thanks very much, Alexander Downer.
Okay.